Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Your Mark on the World show. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe, and I'm a Forbes contributor covering social entrepreneurship and impact investing. We're honored today to have a wonderful guest, Marisa de Belloy, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Cool Effect, a crowdfunding site for carbon credits. I just couldn't be much more excited about a new crowdfunding site, and you know I love crowdfunding sites if you know anything about me. So Marisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, give us the 30-second version of what Cool Effect is.
Yeah, sure. So Cool Effect is a crowdfunding platform for people who want to fight climate change. So you can come to the site, choose a project, and these are projects all over the world, entrepreneurs supporting using simple technology to fight climate change. And you can choose to support one of those projects. It is a donation. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. But when you support the project, we give you all the information you could possibly want about that project. It's highly transparent. And then we follow up with you and we let you know where your money went and what's going on at that project and how you've really affected clear and measurable change.
This is really kind of exciting, but there's so much of this I don't understand, and it's all stuff I think I should understand. I'm embarrassed by the questions that I started developing in my mind as I was reading about what you're doing. So the idea is that you are buying a carbon offset for 1 ton of carbon, right?
Right.
How does a person find out how much carbon they need to offset?
Well, that's a good question. So the average American emits 17 tons of carbon per year. And that's, that's for the average American. So if you're a student, you're probably a little bit less. If you're a business person flying to various meetings during the year, you're probably a little bit more. There are many calculators out there. We don't have a calculator on the site because that was a strategic decision. We're less focused on the offset mentality, although people should think about their own impact when they're deciding to do something to fight climate change, and more focused on the supporting the projects, crowdfunding to support these great projects. Because we're hoping people will go beyond offsetting, because that's frankly what it's going to take if we're going to really fight climate change.
Well, that makes great sense. Now, there's also another side to this coin that I don't understand, and that is the idea that someone is arbitrating whether or not the carbon has been eliminated or reduced, and who's doing that, and how do they decide, and how do you then get that tracked? This really confuses me.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting process, and what the thing to know about is it's highly rigorous and highly scientific. So these are projects that are verifiably reducing carbon, and the way they do that is they use established methodologies, and that might be giving cook stoves to families, efficient cook stoves. So instead of cooking over an open fire with a lot of wood and a lot of smoke and putting a lot of carbon pollution into the atmosphere, among other things, they are using, say, half the wood. So it's a reduction in the wood. Or you're conserving a forest or rebuilding a forest, but you're maintaining to keep that forest up for 100 years. So it's not just somebody planting a few trees in their backyard. Or you are we have a project in Costa Rica that is building wind turbines to power a whole region from wind energy. So they're very clear and scientific projects, and then they go through a long and arduous and quite frankly somewhat costly process. This is completely independent to Cool Effect, where they get verified by one of the major international standards. And so there are several standards out there. There's one called the Gold Standard based out of Geneva. There's one here in California called the CAR, the Climate Action Reserve. And those standards determine who has been able to effectively reduce carbon and at what amount. So they will say, okay, this project has been effective at reducing, let's say, 50,000 tons of carbon, and therefore this project is going to be issued 50,000 carbon credits that they can then sell to individuals or to businesses, et cetera. And it's a great actual way to make projects be able to become self-financing but through a mechanism that is highly verified and actually means something. So when you buy a carbon credit, that carbon credit represents 1 ton of carbon pollution that is not emitted into the atmosphere. So, if I say, okay, I have a 20-ton carbon footprint, I can buy 20 tons of carbon credits, 20 carbon credits. And I know that it's a 1-for-1 exchange, and I have verifiably reduced my impact to 0.
It's a really wonderful platform. Now let's talk about some of the projects on the platform. You've got several on there, and I imagine you hope to grow the portfolio of projects, but tell us about some that are on the site now.
Yeah. Well, first I should start out by saying a little bit more on the last point, which is, so we don't stop there when a project has been issued credits. So they meet, any project that's on our platform as a baseline has met the requirements of an international standard. It will have been verified by a third-party audit. Again, it's outside of what we do, but we have a team of scientists at Cool Effect that then does our own detailed due diligence on those projects to ensure that they really are the cream of the crop. And so we re-verify all of the science. We do something, because many of us come from for-profit backgrounds, we take a very for-profit due diligence approach to these projects. So, and this is something I think that nobody else is doing currently in the market. We look at the financial model, we look at the management and their background, we ensure that the operation is a going concern. So if you're buying credits from this particular project, you can be sure that that money is going back into the project and it's going to help further carbon reductions and further the mission of that project. So we take a very strict for-profit due diligence approach to this. And the projects that we put on the platform are, in our view, the best in the world. But yeah, talking about some of those projects. So take, for example, a cook stove project in Honduras, where the project has put in 130,000 cook stoves. It's dramatically reducing wood consumption and carbon pollution in the region, but it also has a major benefit on women and children's health, because women are cooking over open fires in a small abode. Children are standing right at the height of the fire, and so they're breathing in all of this smoke, and respiratory illness is a huge, huge issue. And so you really get the several benefits. People come to us because they care about climate change and they want to reduce carbon pollution. But each one of our projects has a whole host of other benefits. So, if you also care about women and children's health, you can donate to that project. Another project in Peru is protecting a forest in a region called Alto Mayo. And that project, obviously, by protecting a forest, you are helping to sequester carbon. But at the same time, there are 400 species of birds in that forest, some of which exist nowhere else on the planet. And so you're helping to protect those birds. There's 2,000 plant varieties. Again, there's a rare orchid there that exists nowhere else on the planet. So, for our people who care about, that kind of thing, we have a partnership with Audubon, for example. So, for an Audubon person to want to care about climate change and also birds, this is the perfect project. We have a biogas digester project in India. That's where they take the waste, animal waste and human waste, put it into a biodigester, and it provides clean energy for the family and eventually for the community. And that's, that cleans up, it dramatically reduces the amount of time that women need to spend gathering fuel. It cleans up the whole area because the waste is put into these biodigesters. And so it's a win-win for everybody.
Now, one of the things that I wonder about is the ability of these projects to absorb money and continue their progress and success at that same marginal rate, right? For each project, you indicate a dollar value per ton of carbon sequestered or captured or prevented. It seems to me that, if I show up and I want to buy 17 credits to offset my contribution this year, there's no question about whether one of those projects can absorb the money.
Yeah.
But if, someone like Sergey Brin showed up on this site, thought, I really ought to do something about the carbon at Google, and I realize they do stuff already, but let's just say, for instance, he wanted to offset 1 million tons of carbon or 10 million tons.
Yeah.
Is there a way for someone to see whether that project can actually scale like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Let me talk for a second about pricing. So one thing people don't realize is that, okay, I have this 17-ton footprint. I want to offset that. I do a lot of public speaking, and I'll say, okay, how much do you think that would cost? And people say $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. So the cheapest project on our platform currently is $4.12. So to offset a 17-ton carbon, it's well within the range of many, not all, but many Americans to do this. And the other thing about pricing is that we are the only platform or seller of carbon offsets that is actually transparent about the price, the individual price of each credit. So that's another, because we come from this for-profit background, we thought this is ridiculous. People need to know, the running a project in the United States, like the project we have in Colorado on the Southern Ute Reservation, and running a project in Malawi, the poorest country in the world, does not have the same cost base. So they should not be at the same price per ton. We've gone through and we've said, what's a fair price for this? And let's dig into the financial model, and let's be transparent and show people what the actual price is. And that might sound obvious for anybody in the business world, but it's been revolutionary in the carbon markets. There's a notable lack of transparency. So that's just a note on pricing.
Well, that's exciting. I'm glad you highlighted that, because unless you've shopped for carbon credits, you wouldn't know that.
Yeah. And in terms of being able to accept large amounts of carbon credits, absolutely. So the projects on our platform have collectively reduced about 6 million tons, but that's really just the beginning. And the more capital that goes into these projects, the more they can expand and the more tons that they can reduce. So it's a pure step function of future investment. And that's one of our main criteria for looking at these projects is, can they accept future investment? That's why we look at the management. Do we have the right people in place who can take in large infusions of capital and recreate their model? And, and do they have possibilities for expansion? So, the Uganda cook stove project can expand into neighboring countries. It's got a great model. It's got a distribution model that we believe in, and it can actually go into neighboring countries and just replicate the same success. So that's one of the key things that we look at, because, that's where you get to real scale. So, supporting carbon credits like this it's a great way to combat climate change. It's a piece of the puzzle. But what it needs is a lot of people to come together, join the fight, crowdfund, and then the work can be just exponentially increased.
It's exciting to see, what you've got going on. Tell us a little bit about the founders and how they came up with this concept.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So the founders are Dee and Richard Lawrence, and they about 15 years ago now went on a medical mission to Honduras to basically as translators. They're not doctors, so they went as Spanish-speaking translators, and they went with their daughter, and they were helping to translate and helping the doctors treat all these cases of respiratory illness, and they kept noticing just child after child sucking on nebulizers. And I thought, this is weird. What's going on? And their daughter, didn't have a lot to do, so she got invited by the local kids and was going from house to house, and came back one time and said, Mommy, Daddy, I figured out what's going on. And the fact of the matter was, she was invited to these houses, these tiny little houses, where there was an open fire inside the house. The walls were covered in soot. The mother is coughing, eyes stinging. The children are coughing with their eyes stinging, and it's an incredibly unhealthy environment. And so they set out to change that. They thought, this is, instead of just kind of going and treating the symptoms, because obviously this was a medical mission of American doctors who, they can only come a couple of weeks a year. Let's treat the problem. And so that's what led them to develop a more efficient cook stove, and that's how they started Project Mirador in Honduras. Which is now a self-running nonprofit that has been able to build stoves, over 130,000 stoves. It is one of the projects on the platform, and so we're very clear about that fact that our founders do have a tie to that project. So if people prefer not to support that project for that reason, that's absolutely fine. Both are nonprofits, so there's no profit going back to us. But it is a fantastic project that's been able to really impact a lot of lives in many, many regions in Honduras. And so initially, I think they thought, okay, well, let's just do this and see how it goes. And they discovered the gold standard, which is probably the most rigorous standard for verifying carbon credits in the world. Decided to go for the gold standard, were amazed at how difficult and long a process it was, but it really made the process much, much better. So, they have very strict requirements. I mean, we all know that one of the big problems in charitable giving today is the follow-up, right? Everybody can get excited about building a well or building a school in a village. And, you do that and you have some pictures and it looks great, but 2 years later, somebody goes back and the school is in disrepair, or it's not being used, or the well is in disrepair. So that's the big, thing that nobody likes to talk about, but is very, very common in charitable giving. And the thing about the carbon credit process is that's not allowed, because you re-verify every year. You come back every year, you check on sometimes more often, but at a minimum once a year. You make sure, what are the abandonment rates of the stove? Well, we need to factor that in. If they're getting higher, we need to lower that down because we won't get as many carbon credits. So there's a real incentive to do this right and to make it work. And they actually, at Mirador, they actually introduced a Salesforce system. We have a partnership with Salesforce, Cool Effect does, to be able to really effectively track in these remote regions, giving people handheld devices to go, and everybody has to answer a set of questions, and all of that is tracked in a central database, and they can really have, our abandonment rate went up a little bit this month in this region. Let's go check out what's happening and try to get, so, I mean, it's run like a very, very tight ship, like a business. And that's, that's really important, because when you donate to Cool Effect, you can be sure that you have reduced the amount of carbon that you've bought credits for. So, you've bought 17 tons. Those 17 tons have been reduced. It's been verified, not only by the international standard, not only by the third-party verifier, but also by Cool Effect and our internal team of scientists.
It's really a powerful observation. And it's exciting when you think about being able to buy the credits at such a low price, and to have it all be transparent, and to see the ancillary benefits, the health benefits to the women and children in Honduras, as for instance, that people can achieve by making these donations. Very, very exciting, very exciting. And I really appreciate you sharing them with us. I want to just switch gears a little bit and get some insight from you, because you are an incredibly impressive, I was going to say young woman. You certainly are young compared to the other person in this conversation, but you Yale undergrad, Stanford MBA, you started and ran an investment banking firm in Europe. I mean, you've done some incredible stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, with all the people who look up to you, all the great stuff you're doing, who do you look up to? Who do you admire? Who's your role model?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. My role models have definitely changed over time, as my sort of stage of life has progressed. And I would say I was incredibly impacted by, not to bring this to a political level, but incredibly impacted by Hillary Clinton in the last election. We always talk about having, disadvantaged communities see role models of their ethnicity or their religion, and how that has an impact on young kids. And I've always believed that theoretically, but for me, even as an executive who's accomplished, a fair number of things in my life, seeing a woman at that level in the debates and campaigning, and really, I thought ready to be president of the United States, was incredibly powerful for me. And I found that even, having seen that in the next couple of months, even in my own business dealings, I felt more confident, and I felt more ready to, talk to really push my ideas forward. And so I feel like she actually had a direct impact on me and the work that I was doing.
You'd appreciate this. Great friends of mine have a daughter who's now 5. She was 4 during the election, and she felt exactly the same way. And she would say to her parents, "That girl is running for president." I didn't know that could happen. She was so excited. So
yeah, similar.
when
My daughter saw that had the same reaction, but actually, I would say compared to my daughter, I actually probably had the stronger reaction.
yeah, I think she was a powerful role model to a lot of people. Certainly inspired a lot of people. Well, you've shifted gears rather dramatically in the last couple of projects you've undertaken since you came back to the United States from Europe, working in nonprofits and now in Cool Effect. I wonder if you just take a minute and explain to us why, with all the things you could be doing in the world, why you're doing this.
Yeah, well, I really wanted to have more meaning in my professional life, and throughout my whole career as an investment banker and a startup entrepreneur, I found time to sit on other people's boards and to be a strategic advisor to various nonprofits, and I felt like now was the time to really do this as a full-time career. And California is a great place to do that because a lot of the nonprofits that are started here or run here are very forward-thinking. The funders tend to be people who've made it in the tech world, and so they want quick and fast results. They want people who can move things and move the needle quickly. And that's an environment I've always worked in. So it was very, very appealing to me to do that. And also climate change particularly. So my first role in a nonprofit was at an anti-slavery nonprofit of human trafficking. And obviously that's another horrible, horrible issue, and I cared a lot about it. But what made me switch to climate change is that climate change is underpinning every single issue that anybody cares about in the world today. So, I don't care whether you care about animals, whether you care about human trafficking, whether you care about disease, whatever it is, it's getting worse with climate change. And so I really began to feel that if we don't solve this, then, there's no hope for anything else. So this is the fundamental defining issue of our time.
Yeah. I totally understand. That's a great reason to tackle this project. Now, what is your superpower, Marisa?
My superpower is the ability to get things done in the face of ambiguity. So that's something people who know me have always said I'm very good at kind of moving forward, even though there are lots of strategic questions. Climate change is a very thorny, difficult, big problem. But meeting it within action is the worst thing you can possibly do. Not only do I believe everybody can take immediate action at Cool Effect, but I also in my own life feel like, look, I need to be a part of this. I need to take some action, and it's a giant problem. But the old expression, "How do you eat an elephant?" Well, bite by bite.
That's right. Well, Marisa, I sure appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. The work you're doing is exciting and positive, and really thank you for doing it and for taking the time to share your story with us. Before you go, would you tell us a little bit more about how people can learn more about Cool Effect and how they can connect with you personally?
Yeah, absolutely. So anybody can come to www.cooleffect.org. and check out the website, check out the projects. My own email is mdbelloy@cooleffect.org if anybody wants to connect with me personally, or just send something to our various contact on the website, and you can reach me that way. But yeah, cooleffect.org is the way to come and have a look at our projects.
Fantastic. Well, Marisa, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We wish you every success in the great work you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Devin.
All righty. Let's do some good.